Good evening. Tonight, you step into a wooden room where the air is thick with smoke and salt and the faint sweetness of honey. The walls breathe, the rafters sweat. A low chorus of voices rides the grain of the timbers until the sound feels like a tide in your chest. Your eyes learn the dim quickly. Shadows reveal the curve of horn cups and the soft shine of fur. There's a smell of tar, wet wool, old fish, and warm bread. It is not glamorous, it is human. You sit down and let your shoulders fall. We are going to talk about sex and power among the Vikings. We will do it slowly and without shouting. We will do it in a way that lets sleep arrive when it wishes. The first thing you notice is how much of life here leans toward ritual. Even the way a cup is passed has rules. Mead moves from right to left. Your fingers are sticky with honey. Laughter lifts and then drops as easily as a sail. Someone hums a verse that sounds like a wave rolling over stones. Somewhere a door opens and a stripe of cold air slices the heat. You feel the room take a breath with you. This is where legend and ordinary life touch. This is where the stories of horrifying Viking sexual practices live, not far from the storage crocks of sour milk and the basket of smoked herring. There is a wooden figure near the hearth. It is smooth from the hands that have carried it. The carving is suggestive and blunt, and not embarrassed. The people who gather here will tell you that fertility is not a joke. Spring is a covenant. Children are proof that the gods have not turned their faces away. The figure is food for the eyes while the fields sleep, a promise carved in pine. You can smile at the awkwardness of it, and you can also feel the gravity. If your blanket happens to smell faintly of smoked fish tonight, consider it part of the immersive experience. History does not arrive in one voice. In the year 922, a traveler from the Abbasid world wrote about a Norse funeral on the Volga. He described drink and music and ritual, and a final act that makes the breath catch. Some modern readers take the account as a window thrown open. Others see a storyteller who knew his audience expected to be shocked. Historians are still weighing how literal the description is. How much is moral warning, and how much is a traveler collecting heat for cold readers? You do not need to settle that debate tonight. You only need to notice the distance between what a people do and what their neighbors say they do. What matters for us is this: sex in the North was not a simple private pastime. It was a field of power and insult and law. To call a man unmanly in that world was not merely rude. It could start a blood feud. To accuse someone of the wrong role in bed could be a legal matter. There are words that carried the weight of a wound. There were rituals that tried to bind the seasons to the human body. There are songs that make a mockery of enemies by attacking not their armor, but their dignity. We will walk through these rooms slowly. We will not linger on gore. We will keep the light low. You lick honey from your thumb. A woman 2 benches over ties a small tooth to a strip of leather and knots it around a wrist. Someone calls it a luck charm for love. Someone else snorts and says luck has nothing to do with it. The room laughs. Even in a world of terror and iron, there is always an appetite for small magic. A shark tooth on a string is easier to carry than certainty. If you are tempted to roll your eyes, remember the modern versions. Love potions have mostly turned into playlists and algorithmic matches. The urge is the same. The packaging changes. Our story will have rules to make it safe. We stay PG-13. We keep words soft. We respect the past without pretending it was gentle. There will be jokes to ease the breath. You may count them if it helps you stay awake long enough to fall asleep. First joke. You will not need a dictionary of Old Norse to be here tonight. although if you have one within arm's reach, you may finally get to use it as a very scholarly pillow. Second joke. The gods are welcome to keep the R-rated director's cut. We are fine with the museum edition. Third joke. If a Viking ever told you it is just the mead talking, you already know that excuse has been around longer than modern nightlife. Now, listen to the longhouse. The room gives you an education in the slower senses. Mead tastes like golden straw and warm stone. Linen scratches your wrist. The fire makes a tiny noise like sand being poured. Someone near the door cleans a knife with a strip of wool and a small, careful motion. The knife is not for drama. It is for bread and rope and daily life. You can feel why so many stories about these people are told in a whisper, even when the deeds are loud. The whisper is not weakness. It is a way to hold a bright thing without burning your hands. This season, we will pass through several chambers. We will look at humiliation used as a weapon. We will consider the charge that some rites mixed sex with death. We will watch how law tries to corral desire with fines and banishment and carefully worded insults. We will meet women who hold keys and men who fear being mocked more than being wounded. We will find the quiet bits too, the kitchen sounds, the ordinary touch of a hand that is not a saga but is a life. When the story goes dark, we will add food or a small object to keep our eyes adjusted. A crust of bread, a fishbone carved into a charm, a cloak spread over a sleeping child. Before we begin, an invitation. If this sort of slow history helps you rest, press like and subscribe so the longhouse stays warm. If you feel like adding your voice to the room, tell me in the comments where and when you are listening. Some watch in airports, some in kitchen corners, some in the last 5 minutes of the day when the house has finally decided to be quiet. If there is a place you want this series to visit next, write it down like a message on driftwood and push it toward the tide. Now the fire drops to a steady heart. You pull the blanket over your knees. The room cools by a small degree. Your breath finds a rhythm that matches the water in your ear. The carved figure near the hearth looks both foolish and holy. That is often how power hides itself. You are ready to walk out of rumor and into the village. You are ready to hear the laws and the songs and the silences around them. If your eyes close for a minute, that is all right. The story will still be here. Dim the lights. Set the fan low. Let the room be your longhouse. When you are ready, we step into the wider world beyond this door, and the year will change around you without a jerk. You are the second person in a very old play, and your only job tonight is to listen.
You find yourself on the edge of the North Sea, where the horizon feels closer than the sky. The wind is raw, not cruel but persistent, like a neighbor who will not leave. A Viking settlement is scattered along the shore, houses low and dark, their walls breathing out smoke. The smell is an odd blend: tar and wet wool, herring drying on racks, the faint sweetness of bread baked with barley. These are the foundations of daily life, and also the backdrop to everything whispered about in the sagas and the travelers' accounts. It is the 9th century, and the Norse world is restless. Raids have already reached Lindisfarne, that monastery on the English coast where monks believed they were beyond earthly reach. They were not. Longships have skimmed the rivers of France. There are chieftains who hunger for silver and fame. There are also farmers who want nothing more than a good harvest and a winter without famine. The paradox is sharp: a society both brutal and ordinary, where one man sharpens a sword while another counts sheep. Sex, power, and ritual flow through this landscape like a hidden current. The law speakers know their craft. Words are weapons here. To accuse a man of being ergi, unmanly in bed, could lead to violence more certain than a blade. It was not an idle insult. It touched the core of what it meant to stand in this world. The sagas preserve these accusations in brittle detail, reminding us how language itself can become a battlefield. Historians still debate how widespread such beliefs were. Were they daily anxieties or dramatic devices sharpened by poets for effect? The uncertainty is part of the draw. You sit on the bench by the fire, and you listen, and you realize that history itself is never quite stable. A boy runs past you carrying a small loaf of barley bread. It is coarse, not delicate, and it tastes of smoke. That is dinner, breakfast, and sometimes lunch too. Alongside it, herring, salted and dried, a taste that will follow you into your dreams. The detail is almost funny. When we imagine barbarian feasts, we see mounds of meat and endless wine. In truth, it was more likely fish and flatbread, chewed slowly in smoky rooms. Joke 1. The only all-you-can-eat buffet in the Viking world was the fish rack by the shore. Joke 2. If you wanted gluten-free, you were about 1,000 years too early. Joke 3. Calling it farm to table is technically correct, but it does not make the herring any less salty. Politics here is as tangled as fishing nets. Chieftains compete for loyalty, alliances shift like tides, and behind every oath is the possibility of betrayal. The kings of England and Francia write laws, collect taxes, and pray for protection from these northern raiders. Some hire Viking mercenaries to fight other Vikings. Some pay them to go away. Silver flows north, fueling more raids, more feasts, more rituals that mix desire with dominance. When we read the Chronicles, it is hard to know how much is horror, how much is theater, and how much is a monk riding with one eye on heaven and the other on the next Viking ship. There is also religion woven into daily rhythm. The gods are close, and their symbols are not shy. A wooden phallus might be carried from house to house in spring, a fertility charm that blurs the line between joke and sacred object. The laughter around it does not make it less serious. If anything, the laughter is part of the ritual, a way to fold embarrassment into devotion. Scholars still argue whether these processions were real or imagined, exaggerated by later Christian writers eager to paint pagans as obscene. The line between fact and slander is as faint as smoke against the sky. The settlement quiets at night. You can hear waves grinding pebbles on the shore. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere a man clears his throat in sleep. The longhouse feels less like a theater now and more like a living room. People eat, drink, argue, make love, and wake up stiff the next morning. They are not monsters. They are not saints. They are human, tangled in a culture where sex is power and power is survival. The horrifying practices we will explore do not float in isolation. They are rooted in this world of smoke, fish, bread, insult, and law. The detail that lingers is simple. A small carved comb lies on the table, its teeth worn down. Someone used it this morning to tame a beard or hair before stepping out to face the sea wind. That comb says as much about the Viking world as any saga. Ordinary life and extraordinary ritual live side by side. You will soon see how quickly one can tip into the other.
You wake with your cheek pressed against rough wool. The smoke from last night's fire has sunk into the cloth, and your mouth tastes of barley bread gone dry. For a moment you are not sure whether the sound outside is wind or water. Then the door opens, and the smell of salt air answers for you. You are in a Norse settlement, and the day is beginning with all its duties and its dangers. Your body feels heavy. The straw mattress has shifted under you, and your hip aches where the stalks have poked through. You pull your tunic closer, scratchy against your skin, and stand. A chill settles instantly on your bare feet. There is nothing romantic about this morning. It is just cold and work waiting to be done. But today will also show you how quickly daily life can turn into ritual, and how ritual can turn into horror. Outside, women bend over vats of fish,
salting them with practiced movements. Children run with sticks, chasing each other between the racks of drying cod. The detail strikes you. This is not the stuff of sagas, but the texture of real life. Still, the same hands that salt fish will carry charms in the evening, charms that blur the line between fertility prayer and obscene joke. You wonder how they see it: embarrassing, sacred, or both. Historians still argue whether Viking communities embraced open sexual display as part of ritual, or whether later writers exaggerated it. The uncertainty lies in the silence of those who lived it and never wrote it down. Your task this morning is simple. You gather wood. The axe bites into the log with a dull thud, and the scent of pine fills the air. As you split the wood, you think about the whispers you heard last night, that a raid is being planned, and that with raids come not only silver, but stories of domination. Men return boasting not just of treasure, but of shaming their enemies in ways too intimate to describe without lowering their voice. It is hard to separate truth from bravado, but you sense the weight of it, how sex can be wielded like a blade to cut into another man's honor. At midday, you sit with the others. The food is plain: flatbread, dried fish, and a weak broth that smells faintly of cabbage. One man jokes that if Odin himself appeared, he would still be handed fish. Joke 1: if variety is the spice of life, this meal has never heard of spice. Joke 2: your broth is so thin, you can see your reflection judging you in it. Joke 3: at least the bread is gluten positive, 1,000 years before anyone thought to avoid it. The talk turns serious. A skald recites a short verse mocking a rival chieftain as unmanly. The laughter is sharp. You feel the sting of it even as an observer. Here, to be accused of weakness in bed is worse than being called a coward in battle. It touches dignity at the deepest point. A feud can begin with such words. The law courts recognize these insults. They are dangerous as weapons, yet easy to conceal in song. Scholars still debate how literally these verses should be taken. Were they playful exaggerations or reports of real social tension? The answer drifts between performance and truth. As evening comes, you feel your body ache from the labor. You rub resin from your hands, sticky and sweet. The sky is streaked with red, and gulls circle above the shore. A group begins to gather at the longhouse. Someone carries a small wooden carving, laughing as it is passed around. Some avert their eyes. Others grin openly. It is crude, yes, but also sacred. It promises fertility for fields and families. You sense that if you laugh too loudly, you will offend, and if you stay silent, you will also offend. The object holds power in its very awkwardness. You slip inside the longhouse, where warmth greets you. The benches creak as people settle in. Mead is poured. The air smells of honey and smoke. For a moment, you think of the comb left on the table this morning and how ordinary it looked. Yet now, the room seems to tilt towards something heavier. You realize that the stories of horrifying Viking sexual practices are not outliers. They are woven into this same fabric of daily meals, insults, and prayers. The night begins with laughter, but beneath it lies a current of unease. You will see soon enough how that current swells into something darker.
The next morning, your stomach speaks louder than the gulls outside. It is not the sharp pain of hunger, but a slow, hollow ache that drags at your ribs. You chew a piece of barley bread so hard it cracks at the edges like bark. The air is damp. Your tunic still smells of smoke. A bowl of thin fish broth makes its way around, but by the time it reaches you, there are only pale scraps left. You drink anyway. Salt burns your throat, and for a moment you feel full, though you know it is an illusion. The longhouse is restless. Whispers coil around the benches about shortages. There is not enough grain, not enough dried fish, not enough of anything. Winter always presses its thumb into this place, and when supplies grow thin, bodies feel it first. The irony is sharp. In sagas, feasts are endless, horns spill with mead, tables bend under roasted meat. Reality is much quieter. You are handed a slice of seal fat wrapped in dried seaweed. That is dinner. Joke 1, the seal fat does not taste like chicken. Joke 2, the seaweed is not a garnish, it is the whole plate. Joke 3, if anyone invents sushi in this world, it will be by accident, and probably regretted. The laws of rationing are not new. Chieftains declare how much each household must provide, how much must be set aside for warriors, how much for guests. It sounds fair, but you watch how quickly fairness bends. Those with silver or influence always seem to find a way to keep their benches fuller. Historians still argue whether these shortages were constant or cyclical, whether famine was exaggerated in the sagas to heighten drama. The evidence is patchy. A record here, a poem there, bones in a midden showing signs of malnutrition. You cannot decide from the bench of the longhouse. You only know the bread is smaller each day. By evening, your body feels heavier than yesterday. The ache is everywhere. Hunger makes small tasks harder. Your axe slips when you split wood. Your hands tremble. The cold does not help. You pull your cloak tight, but the wind still finds seams. It smells of brine and iron. When you lie down, your belly groans, and you wonder how many nights until it stops complaining altogether. But ritual continues, even when food is scarce. Tonight, in the middle of want, a figure is carried through the settlement. It is carved wood again, larger this time, crude and unmistakable. It is part fertility rite, part communal joke, and part plea to the gods. Some laugh too loud, some lower their eyes, some clutch their children closer. You feel the contradiction in your bones, laughter in the face of want, obscenity wrapped around sacred prayer. Was it real? Or is it colored by the Christian chroniclers who describe such rites with disgust? Historians are still arguing, still pulling at the threads, still deciding which part is theater and which part is truth. The air inside the longhouse is thicker than yesterday. Mead is passed around, warming throats, dulling stomachs. The skald sings verses that make fun of rivals' bodies, of their supposed failures in bed. The crowd laughs, hungry but not silent. You wonder whether laughter fills the belly or only distracts it. The fire pops. You rub your hands and feel the resin stick again. In the corner sits an old woman sewing a torn cloak with thread so fine you barely see it in the light. She works slowly, silently, as if time is not running short. The detail stays with you. Even when hunger presses down, small acts of care hold the world together. The cloak will be warmer tomorrow, the hunger will not. This is the first layer of suffering, the slow erosion of comfort, the steady ache of not enough. You taste it in every bite of bread that crumbles too fast. You hear it in every laugh that is sharper than it should be. You feel it in the way bodies lean closer to the fire, not for company, but for heat.
The sickness begins quietly. At first, it is only a cough in the corner of the longhouse, a sound easy to ignore beneath the hum of conversation. But soon the cough repeats, harsher, joined by another and another. You wake in the dark with your throat burning, your head heavy, your breath a little shorter than it should be. The room smells of damp wool, sweat, and smoke, comforting in small doses, suffocating when you cannot escape. Your body feels tired before the day even begins. The floor beneath the straw is cold and uneven, pressing into your hip bones. You shift, trying to find comfort, but the ache follows you up into standing. Hunger gnaws still, but sickness sharpens the edges. A boy sits beside the fire with his knees drawn to his chest, shivering though the flames lick bright. You watch his mother wrap him in a cloak patched too many times to count. Outside, the mud is slick with rain. Your shoes are broken at the seam, leather split so that water seeps in at every step. The cold crawls up from your toes into your spine. You pull the cloak tighter, but the wind slides through anyway. The detail is small but inescapable. Wet feet mean weakness, and weakness means you fall behind. Archaeologists find shoes in graves worn to threads, soles patched and patched again, proof that even simple leather was a luxury that wore out too soon. At midday, you are handed a small bowl. Inside is porridge, thinned with water, its surface broken by a few limp greens. Someone says it is better than nothing. Joke 1, if better than nothing had a recipe, this would be it. Joke 2, the greens are so faint you wonder if they slipped in by accident. Joke 3, you have officially unlocked the medieval version of instant noodles, ready in minutes, disappointing for hours. The talk around you grows quieter. Illness makes people cautious. Eyes linger on those who cough too long. In a society where strength is survival, visible weakness is dangerous. There is no doctor here, only herbs, charms, and the hope that the gods will not notice you this week. Historians debate how severe these outbreaks were. Some argue they were sporadic, tied to damp winters and close quarters. Others suggest a constant background of sickness that shaped daily life far more than the sagas reveal. The truth is probably somewhere between, neither apocalyptic nor rare, but always lurking. You sit on a bench in the longhouse, shoulders heavy, and listen to the skald. His verse mocks a rival for being frail in both body and bed. The crowd laughs, sharp and cruel, but you hear the nervousness beneath it. To laugh at another's weakness is to push fear away for a moment. You cough into your sleeve, quietly, hoping no one notices. As evening falls, fatigue thickens. The tasks you managed yesterday feel impossible today. Your arms ache, splitting wood. Your chest tightens, carrying water. You wonder how long before someone else must take your place, or whether there will be anyone left strong enough to do so. A small moment stays with you. A child drops a wooden toy, carved from driftwood, its edges smoothed by many hands. The toy is nothing, a figure with awkward limbs, but it has been carried through hunger and now through sickness. The child picks it up again, clutches it tight, and smiles faintly. Even in illness, the world insists on fragments of play. That, too, is survival. This is the second layer of suffering, the creeping weakness of the body, the awareness that your cloak is too thin, your shoes too broken, your breath too shallow. The sagas do not dwell on it, but you feel it in every step.
You are no longer the woodcutter at the edge of the settlement. Tonight you sit on the other side of the fire, in the skin of someone else. You are a woman bound to this household, not by blood, but by ownership. A thrall. Your hands smell of tallow from the lamps you trimmed, of sour milk from the churn you scrubbed, of salt from the fish you gutted until your nails grew soft and ridged. The smoke in the longhouse sticks to you like another garment. You do not own your body here, but you still carry it through the day as carefully as you can. The world looks different from your bench. The talk of raids and silver is not exciting. It is a cloud of dread, for you know what happens when ships leave and return. The men boast of what they will take, what they will do, and you hear in those boasts the shadow of your own life. Historians wrestle with how to frame this. Were Viking thralls treated as livestock, as property, or as half members of the household? The sagas rarely tell their stories directly. Instead, they flicker at the edges, glimpsed in a passing insult, a law code, a half line about a slave girl handed to a guest. You remember the day you were brought here. The river was wide, and the air smelled of reeds. Chains bit your wrists, but the louder pain was in your chest. You had a name once that no one here speaks. Now you are called simply the girl. You carry buckets, fetch wood, and pour mead into cups. You know the weight of each man's gaze, the difference between a command and a threat, the small shiver when laughter turns sharp. Tonight, the longhouse is crowded. A feast is called not because there is plenty, but because there is fear. People eat loudly to hide their worry. You move between benches, carrying bread that crumbles too easily, ladling broth that tastes mostly of water. Joke 1. If you spill the broth, the floor drinks better than the men do. Joke 2. When you hand over dried fish, you wonder if it was salted with actual salt or just with your own sweat. Joke 3. You realize that even in a house full of warriors, the loudest sound is still someone slurping. A skald begins to recite. His words are knives aimed at absent rivals. He mocks their manhood, their supposed submission. The crowd roars. You smile faintly, though you do not join. You have learned the safest expression is the one that draws the least notice. Yet inside you mark the cruelty. In this society, even words can undress a man against his will. Sexual humiliation is not just an act, but a weapon, wielded in verse, in law, in rumor. Scholars debate how deeply this shaped Viking culture, whether it was common ritual or the invention of poets. From your bench, it feels entirely real. A detail catches your eye. On the central post of the hall, carved lines spiral into a figure, half abstract, half explicit. Children run past it without shame, tracing the grooves with sticky fingers. The carving is both holy and obscene, fertility charm and casual decoration. It reminds you that the boundary between sacred and profane is thin here, thinner than the smoke drifting above. Later, when the fire drops, you curl on the floor near the other thralls. The straw pokes through the cloth, and the smell of damp earth rises from the ground. You clutch a scrap of cloth torn from a sleeve, the only thing that feels like your own. It smells faintly of herbs. You do not remember which ones. It does not matter. What matters is the small illusion of possession. This is your place in the story. Half seen, half spoken, always working, always waiting. The sagas may forget your name, but your breath is still part of this room.
The night does not give you rest. You lie on straw that scratches through thin cloth, and the smoke clings to your lungs long after the fire has burned low. Sleep comes in fragments, broken by the sound of coughing, by the roll of a man shifting his weight, by the cry of a baby somewhere in the dark. Your eyes close, but your body never softens. When dawn arrives, it feels like you never truly left the night. You rise before the warriors. You fetch water from the well, the rope wet and stiff in your hands, the bucket heavy against your knee. Your body aches with the kind of tired that does not fade with food or warmth. It is exhaustion that seeps into the joints, a dull, constant weight. You carry the bucket carefully. To spill even a little means another trip, another chance for your arms to shake. The day begins with bread again, flat, hard, and cold. You chew slowly, forcing it down a throat still raw from smoke. Today there is also a strange addition, fermented whey. It smells sour, sharp enough to sting your nose. Joke 1, it tastes like milk that lost a bet. Joke 2, the only thing worse than drinking it is drinking it warm. Joke 3, if the gods of Valhalla were offered this, even they might politely decline. Yet you swallow because you must. Food is food. The men talk of raids, their voices heavy with bravado. You listen from the edge. They speak of women taken, of rivals humiliated, of songs that will be sung. To them, it is power. To you, it is warning. The sagas repeat these boasts like trophies, but sitting here, you hear the threat beneath. Historians argue whether such talk was truth or performance, whether the cruelty was daily fact or rare theater. You do not need to decide. For you, the fear is real, either way. The work drags on. You knead bread until your forearms burn, wash wool until your knuckles split, patch garments with eyes that blur from fatigue. A cloak hangs in front of you, torn at the shoulder. You stitch slowly, the thread rough, the needle blunt. Every motion feels heavier than the one before. There is no pause, no hour to call your own. Fatigue is not just in the body, it creeps into the mind, making thought itself sluggish. At midday, you step outside. The air is sharp and cold, but for a moment it feels cleaner than the smoke of the longhouse. Children chase each other along the shore, their laughter thin against the wind. You remember when you laughed that way, but the memory feels distant, like a story told by someone else. A ritual breaks the monotony. A small animal is led to the center of the settlement, a goat with restless eyes. Its bleating cuts through the air. People gather, some serious, some smiling. There are chants, awkward laughter, a mixture of reverence and jest. You watch, tired, and wonder whether this is meant to please the gods or simply to distract the people from their own weariness. Scholars still debate, were such rituals deeply believed or half performance to knit the community together? The truth hides in the smoke. Evening comes. The fire is lit again, the mead passed around. The warriors laugh louder than they should, their voices filling the hall. You move between them, pouring, serving, silent. The weight of the day presses down on your shoulders, and you know the night will not bring relief. A detail lingers as you curl down again. A small piece of driftwood, carved into the shape of a bird, lies near your straw bed. Someone's child must have dropped it. Its wings are uneven, its head too large, but it carries a kind of fragile grace. You trace its surface with your thumb, then let it fall. This is the first layer of suffering for you. Not only hunger, but exhaustion, the slow grinding down of body and spirit by endless tasks and sleepless nights.
Night after night you serve in the longhouse, but your mind begins to fray. Exhaustion is no longer just in the body, it has started to gnaw at your judgment. You catch yourself staring at the fire too long, forgetting the cup in your hand, the voice that has called your name. The smallest mistake can draw a blow, or worse. Fear becomes its own companion, sitting beside you at the bench, shadowing every motion of your day. One evening, as the warriors drink, the skald recites the verses too sharp to be only entertainment. His lines accuse a rival of being passive in bed, of shame that cannot be washed away. The men roar with laughter, but beneath the roar is a silence that tightens your chest. These are not just jokes, they're daggers, meant to wound even at a distance. You feel the sting, though it is not aimed at you. You wonder if any word, spoken in jest, can shift your own fate one day. Historians still argue, were these verses social satire, or were they legal ammunition, binding enough to bring someone to trial? You cannot parse the debate, but you feel the danger of a world where words can kill. Later that week, a man you serve presses a hand against your arm, lingering too long. You freeze. His grip is not violent, but it is not a request. Your breath falters. Across the room, another thrall watches you, eyes wide, then looks away. You know what that silence means. No one will speak. Survival is too narrow a rope to risk walking it for someone else. Betrayal is not an act here. It is the absence of help, the turning of eyes toward the fire. Your body moves through the motions of serving, but inside, you're tangled. If you resist, you risk punishment. If you submit, you risk becoming invisible. There is no right choice, only different weights of silence.
This is the moral fracture, not whether you will act with honor, but how much of yourself you can keep hidden without being broken. The food that night is a thin gruel with lumps of barley and a slice of dried meat floating like driftwood. Joke 1, the meat is so tough you could resole your shoes with it. Joke 2, calling it stew is generous, calling it hot water is honest. Joke 3, at least it fills the silence in your mouth when you cannot speak. You eat quickly, eyes down, grateful for the distraction of chewing. In the corner of the hall, someone pulls out a small carved amulet, bone smoothed into the shape of a phallus. Some laugh, some treat it as holy, and for a moment the room divides along invisible lines. To you, the object is neither funny nor sacred. It is simply another reminder that your body is not your own. Later, as you lie awake on straw, you hear two warriors whispering. They speak of a raid, of women to be taken, of songs to be sung. One man hesitates. He mutters that perhaps the gods do not favor such cruelty. The other laughs, loud and bitter, and says the gods only care about victory. You wonder which voice is closer to truth, and whether either man believes the words he speaks. This is the second layer of suffering, the crack not in the body but in the spirit, where silence becomes betrayal, where fear becomes the only law you can trust. You close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow the fire will burn again, the bread will break again, and your choices will narrow again.
The days have started to blur, the hours smudging together like ink spilled across parchment. You wake, you serve, you bend your back to tasks, and yet nothing seems to change. The repetition itself becomes its own kind of weight. You find yourself counting not events, but sounds. The scrape of wooden bowls, the hiss of wet logs catching fire, the steady creak of the roof beams when the wind presses down. These are the rhythms of a life that feels endless, though you know it is fragile. The longhouse is quieter tonight. The men are gone to prepare for a raid, and those who remain speak in lower tones. Without the bravado of warriors, the hall feels smaller, softer, almost ordinary. A woman hums a lullaby while rocking her child, the tune more soothing than the fire itself. Another mends a cloak, her needle flashing in the glow. The scent is not of feast, but of ash and boiled cabbage. It clings to your hair and clothes until it feels like your very skin smells of smoke and greens. On the bench near you, a wooden spoon lies, its handle worn thin from years of use. The bowl of it is darkened by broth, the edge slightly cracked. It is a humble object, but it tells a story longer than any saga. Someone carved it. Someone ate with it every day. Someone will still hold it long after tonight. You trace the groove with your eyes and feel a strange comfort in its ordinariness. Dinner is as predictable as sunrise, barley bread and thin soup. This time, a scrap of dried fish floats in the pot, too small to divide evenly. Joke 1, the fish is so little you could name it before you eat it. Joke 2, the broth is like a rumor, watery, thin, but still everyone drinks it. Joke 3, you realize that for once, the bread is the main course, and the soup just a drink that pretends to be important. The hours pass slowly. You hear the loom creak in the corner as someone weaves, the threads clicking like distant rain. You hear children whisper in their sleep, turning over in straw beds. You hear your own breath, steady, heavy, and wonder how many nights have sounded exactly like this, how many more will echo the same. Historians write of battles and voyages, but they rarely capture this, the long, quiet repetition of survival, where nothing happens, and yet everything is happening, in the wearing down of time. A single ritual interrupts the monotony. An elder sprinkles mead onto the floor beams, muttering a prayer that the house stands strong through the season. The act is small, almost invisible. Mead is precious. Spilling it is a sacrifice. You watch the drops sink into the wood, darkening it, and you think about how many times the same gesture has been made, each one forgotten, yet each one keeping the walls upright in memory. Historians debate whether such household rituals were universal or only fragments preserved in later stories. Either way, you see how they knit the silence together, giving meaning to days that otherwise bleed into one another. You lie down on the straw and close your eyes. The air is heavy with smoke. Your belly is neither full nor empty, just a dull in-between. Time stretches, each hour looking like the next. This is not the roar of history, it is its hum. This interlude is the sound of waiting, the endless repetition that wears at the mind as surely as hunger wears at the body.
The longhouse fills again, not with laughter, but with words. The air is heavy with the weight of law. A man stands near the central post, his voice measured, reciting statutes from memory. He is a law speaker, and his craft is sharper than any blade. You listen because everyone must. In this world, survival is not only a matter of food or strength, it is also about knowing the invisible threads that tie one body to another. The laws are strange to modern ears, but they are precise. To accuse a man of being arger, unmanly, shamed in bed, is not a mere insult. It can be grounds for a case, the start of a blood feud, the trigger for vengeance that will ripple through families. The line between words and wounds is thin here. Historians still argue, were these laws meant to protect dignity or to weaponize it? Were they widely enforced or tools dragged out when convenient? The uncertainty lingers like smoke that never quite clears. Punishments are spoken aloud. Theft can be repaid in silver. Murder may be balanced by exile or blood. But accusations of sexual shame carry their own rituals. A man found guilty of lying with another against custom risks outlawry, banishment from the protection of society. To be cast out is worse than to be beaten. The law does not spill your blood, it makes you invisible. And in this land, invisibility is a slow death. The detail that strikes you most is not the threat of exile, but the memory of food wrapped inside the law. Grain levies are counted, households ordered to provide certain amounts to the chieftain's store. Fail to deliver, and punishment follows. Tonight the levy is thin, loaves baked with chaff to stretch the flour. You chew a slice that tastes of straw more than grain. Joke 1, if fiber makes you strong, this bread could make you immortal. Joke 2, you wonder whether the law should fine the baker for cruelty. Joke 3, chewing it feels like gnawing a shoe, but at least the shoe is warm. A fragment of dried meat is placed beside the bread, salted so heavily it burns your tongue. The hall accepts it without complaint. Hunger makes law tolerable. And yet, in these quiet acts, you see how rules are not just punishments, but control over daily sustenance. Law decides not only who sleeps with whom, but also who eats and how much. You notice a small tablet of wood scratched with tally marks, passed hand to hand. It records debts, obligations, promises made under the weight of the law. The marks are rough but permanent in meaning. Each cut is a reminder, survival here is not private, it is always entangled in what others claim from you. When the recitations end, the hall exhales. Some nod, some mutter, some stay silent, but you feel the rules lingering, invisible and binding. The sagas sing of heroes, but beneath the songs lies this machinery, words, punishments, rations, debts. It is less glorious, but no less powerful. As you curl on the straw, the taste of straw bread still in your mouth, you realize that the system is not separate from suffering. It is part of it. Hunger and fear are managed by decree, wrapped in ritual, enforced with silence. This is the machinery of order, fragile, yet relentless, built to hold a world where shame can kill as surely as hunger.
The shortages sharpen into something harder now. Hunger is no longer a dull ache, it gnaws with teeth. The bread ration shrinks until what you hold in your hand looks more like a crust than a meal. Grain has been stretched so thin with chaff and bark that chewing feels like grinding stone between your teeth. Your stomach cramps after eating, but you still swallow, because not eating would be worse. The hall murmurs with complaint, though quietly. Everyone knows the chieftain's stores still hold silver and salted meat, yet the benches here creak with hollow bellies. One day, the bread runs out altogether, and a pot of broth is all that remains. Water darkened by a bone, boiled again and again until even the marrow has given up. Joke 1. The bone has been in that pot so long it deserves its own seat in the longhouse. Joke 2. The broth is so weak you could use it as window wash. Joke 3. Hunger makes even that broth taste like victory, though only for a moment. The worst day comes when snow pins the settlement in silence. The wind is a knife slicing through gaps in the walls. The fire sputters low, fuel scarce. You wrap yourself in every scrap of cloth you own, but still your fingers go numb. A child coughs until his body shakes. An elder refuses his portion, pressing it into the hands of a grandson who swallows too fast, as though speed will make the food multiply. You see that scene and know it will stay in memory long after the sagas forget it. Archaeologists uncover bones marked by malnutrition, evidence that winters like this were not rare. Historians debate how communities survived. Was it trade, raiding, desperate foraging, or sheer endurance? The sagas mention hardship, but rarely the details of daily starvation. Perhaps they thought such things too ordinary, too shameful, or too wearying to record. Yet here in the longhouse, the suffering is the whole story. The rules of rationing break down. Men slip into the storehouse at night. A woman is caught hiding a loaf beneath her cloak for her child. She is shamed publicly, her name spat out in front of the benches. The irony bites. Laws meant to ensure fairness now breed theft, secrecy, and fear. The chieftain orders stricter counts, harsher punishments, but you see the cracks forming. Rules cannot feed an empty stomach. You think of the worst day again. The silence of snow, the cough of children, the fire burning too low. That is how history escalates. Not always with blood, but with a slow, grinding erosion that leaves nothing left to give. This is the first arc of escalation, when want sharpens into desperation, when order bends beneath the weight of empty bowls, when even laughter sounds thin.
Hunger bends bodies, but it is silence that breaks trust. In the longhouse, you begin to hear less laughter and more whispers. People no longer meet each other's eyes. The rules of courtesy, so loudly recited only weeks ago, start to feel fragile, like ice too thin to carry weight. You sense it when a bowl is passed, and hands hesitate before letting go. You sense it when someone coughs, and the bench shifts slightly away. One night, a thrall is accused of stealing from the storehouse. No one saw it clearly, but everyone is eager to believe. The law speaker recites punishment, but his voice lacks conviction. Was the theft real, or was the hunger of one child enough to make suspicion grow teeth? The thrall swears innocence, voice trembling. No one speaks for her, not because they believe she is guilty, but because silence is safer. You sit there, and you realize that betrayal here is not choosing against someone, it is choosing nothing at all. The food served that evening is stranger than before. Thin strips of dried seaweed boiled in water. It is chewy, salty, almost bitter. Joke 1. it tastes like the ocean decided to punish you. Joke 2, it leaves your teeth greener than spring grass. Joke 3, calling it a meal is optimistic. Calling it not empty is accurate. You chew slowly, pretending it fills the space that bread used to fill. You catch fragments of dialogue in the smoke. A woman whispers to her neighbor, "If I must give him, better to give quietly than to lose the house." Her words hang in the air, heavier than ash. She is speaking of her daughter, though she does not name her. The exchange is not violent, not yet, but it is the kind of transaction that lives in silence. You look away, but the whisper clings. This is how desperation moves, not always with screams, but with bargains made in shadows. Historians argue whether such accounts are exaggerations, stories told by outsiders eager to portray Vikings as monstrous. Were these humiliations daily reality, or rare cruelties painted large in saga and travelogue? The evidence is scattered, the truth smudged by centuries of bias. Yet sitting here, the debate feels irrelevant. In the face of hunger and fear, morality itself thins like broth. That night you dream of the sea. You see longships pulling away, their prows sharp against the gray horizon. Men laugh aboard them, singing verses of conquest, of silver, of women. You wake with the song still in your ears, but in the hall, no one sings. Silence has become the only safe language. This is the second arc of escalation. Not just the body breaking, but the soul bending. Not just hunger gnawing at bone, but fear eroding trust until betrayal feels like the only form of survival left.
The longhouse trembles with noise, not the quiet murmurs of hunger, nor the low hum of daily routine, but the jagged roar of men returned from a raid. Boots slam the floor, horns spill with mead, voices crash over one another like waves striking rock. The air is thick sweat, iron, salt, smoke. You press yourself against the wall and feel the timbers shiver, as if the house itself wants to retreat. Tonight is not a feast of plenty. It is a spectacle of power. Silver is poured onto the table, coins clattering like hail. A woman is dragged forward, foreign in her dress and in her eyes. She is made to kneel while men shout verses meant to humiliate their absent enemies through her body. It is not a private act. It is staged, sung, wrapped in ritual. This is where the horrifying practices of the Vikings come closest to flesh. Was it real? Or was it performance meant to terrify observers like Ibn Fadlan, who recorded tales of funerary rites laced with sexual violence? Scholars debate still, but from your corner of the longhouse, there is no neat line between ritual and cruelty. The firelight flickers, throwing shadows against the beams. Someone slams a shield in rhythm, turning the hall into a drum. The skald spits out verses sharp as knives, accusations of unmanliness, boasts of conquest, laughter that cuts deeper than steel. The room shakes with it. Even those who do not laugh are swept into the current, because silence could be more dangerous than noise. Food arrives, but it is grotesque in its irony. A whole animal's head, boiled, eyes still intact, set at the center as a trophy. Men tear pieces with greasy fingers, grease shining on their lips. Joke 1. The head stares at you as if asking for your seat back. Joke 2. The smell alone could drive away an army. Joke 3. Someone insists it's the best cut, proving that hunger can make liars of anyone. You take a piece because refusal is not an option. The fat coats your tongue, and you swallow hard. The ritual moves darker still. A goat is brought in, its bleeding sharp against the roar. Its sacrifice is messy, the floor slick,
the heat of blood mingling with smoke. Some laugh, some chant, some look away. You look at the notched pillar where blood drips down, soaking into old stains, and you wonder how many times this same scene has unfolded. The line between religion, humiliation, and entertainment blurs until it is impossible to tell which is which. Historians wrestle with this moment. Was Viking sexuality as violent and ritualized as the sources suggest? Were outsiders exaggerating to paint pagans as obscene? Or was there a kernel of truth that in times of hunger, war, and fear, bodies became symbols, tools, and sacrifices? No single answer satisfies. The sagas themselves dodge clarity, offering hints, accusations, and silences. The noise builds until your body vibrates with it. Shield against shield, voice against voice, laughter splitting into howls. You feel there is no air left in the room, only smoke and frenzy. The humiliation, the boasting, the ritual blood, all of it folds together into a climax that leaves no space for breath. And then, as suddenly as it surged, the roar thins. Men slump, meads spill, the fire pops alone. The woman is gone from the center, pulled into shadow. The goat's carcass is dragged aside. The coins lie scattered, cold. What remains is silence, heavy enough to crush the chest. This is the peak, the point where suffering, ritual, and violence merge so tightly they are indistinguishable. You sit still, heart hammering, wondering what piece of yourself you have left untouched.
Morning comes with a silence more unsettling than the roar of the night before. The longhouse smells of stale mead, burnt wood, and something metallic that lingers in the throat. The benches are littered with bones, greasy scraps, overturned cups. A shield lies flat on the floor as if dropped mid-song. You step over it carefully. No one speaks of what happened. That is how memory is shaped here, not in retelling, but in omission. The woman taken into the shadows does not return to her place. Her absence hangs heavier than her presence ever did. A few glance toward the doorway, as if expecting her to walk back in, carrying bread or broth. She does not. The silence is explanation enough. Historians still argue whether these accounts of ritual humiliation and sexual violence are fact or exaggeration, whether Christian chroniclers embroidered them to make pagans monstrous. But here, the absence of one voice is as sharp as any record. Silence itself becomes evidence. You notice objects scattered on the ground, a torn strip of fabric, once a sash, a wooden comb, teeth broken, a drinking horn cracked down the middle. They are not grand relics, not saga-worthy, but they are what remains when the noise has passed. Archaeologists often find such fragments, combs, beads, shards of pottery, and from them reconstruct the outlines of lives. They are quieter than sagas, but perhaps truer. Food, such as it is meager. A pot of porridge, thinned so far it is little more than cloudy water. Someone drops in a handful of dried berries, shriveled and bitter, meant to sweeten the taste, but failing. Joke 1. The berries are so sour you pucker for the rest of the day. Joke 2. Calling this porridge fortified is wishful thinking. Joke 3. At least it proves the Vikings invented disappointment long before modern cuisine did. You eat it anyway, because refusal is not a choice. The children play outside, their laughter shrill against the dull sky. They chase one another with sticks, unaware or perhaps deliberately ignoring what happened the night before. Their joy is a rebellion of its own, proof that life insists on continuing. Yet you notice how the adults watch them too closely, how the laughter dies quickly when footsteps approach. The old woman by the fire sews again. This time she patches a cloak with thread dyed faintly red. The color catches your eye. It is small, almost hidden, but it glows in the smoke like a spark. You realize the detail will linger in memory long after the events of last night are blurred. A torn cloak, mended with red thread. An image quieter than violence, but sharper in its endurance. Historians measure consequences in dates. Christianization sweeping north, laws shifting, rituals outlawed. But in this hall, consequences are measured in absences, in silences, in the small repairs made after the breaking. The echoes of horror live not just in sagas or chronicles, but in the way people carry themselves the next morning, in the fragments left on the ground, in the thread chosen for a patch. This is the aftermath. The roar fades, but its shadow lengthens.
The longhouse is quiet now. The fire has sunk into coals, glowing faintly like embers beneath ash. Smoke drifts low, gentle rather than suffocating. You sit alone, the benches empty, the night calm. What remains is not the roar of songs or the clash of shields, but the soft shuffle of straw under your feet and the steady hum of the sea beyond the walls. On the central post, the same carved figure looks down at you. By daylight, it was crude, by firelight, obscene. But now, in this hush, it is only wood smoothed by touch. It no longer threatens, no longer laughs. It simply endures. You think of how many nights it has watched, how many voices have risen and fallen under its gaze. Gods fade, faiths change, but the carving stays, a witness too stubborn to rot. A small object rests by your side, the comb with broken teeth you noticed before. It is useless now, unable to tame hair or beard, yet someone once carried it, treasured it enough to carve. Its brokenness is the truth of this story. What survives is rarely whole. Memory is always cracked, stitched together by fragments, by silence, by speculation. Historians argue, filling the gaps with theory and debate. You hold the comb in your palm and feel that even fragments can carry a weight greater than chronicles. Tonight's meal lingers in your mouth still, watery porridge, sour berries, the ghost of bread that once was. Joke 1, you suspect even the gods would have asked for seconds and still gone hungry. Joke 2, the berries tasted more like punishment than blessing. Joke 3, the porridge was thin enough to see tomorrow through the bottom of the bowl. The laughter the jokes bring is small, but it is enough. Even bitterness has its place in survival. Outside, the wind stirs. You hear the sea grinding stones along the shore, the eternal rhythm that no saga could ever capture fully. Children sleep, warriors snore, the old woman's hands are finally still. All the noise of violence, of humiliation, of ritual cruelty, none of it is here now. What you are left with is breath, warmth, the faint crackle of a coal. History always ends this way, not with fanfare, but with quiet. You lean back, eyes heavy, and think of how the echoes of Viking life still ripple in stories told by enemies, in sagas written generations later, in the fascination of modern minds searching for both horror and meaning. Did they truly live as obscenely, as violently as rumor claims, or were they no worse than any people, only cast in harsher shadows because the monks who wrote their story feared them? The question remains unanswered, and perhaps that is the point. History is not closure. It is the sound of waves in the dark, always moving, never still. The last image is simple, a thread of red cloth mending a torn cloak, catching the firelight like a tiny flame. It is quiet, fragile, ordinary, but it outlives the roar, the ritual, the fear. That is how stories survive, not in the spectacle, but in the detail that refuses to be forgotten. Now the coals sink lower, and your eyes grow heavier. The longhouse, with all its noise and shadows, becomes only a cradle for sleep. Let the wind outside be your lullaby. Let the sea carry you further away. The story is finished. The night continues.